We have Sian and Molly here, ready to lead us through some of their story and to share a little bit of their own journeys. And we were just talking and really invite you to post questions, and Sian and Molly will make time at the end of their presentation to answer the questions and to have conversation with you. So I think we'll just hand over to you, Sian and Molly.
Thank you, Jo. Well, welcome everybody, and those who will be listening later as well, to what we've coined Home Education Plus. Both Sian and I are adoptive parents, and we were told during our training that this is going to be Parenting Plus. And actually, I think this works quite well for home education as well. It's Home Education Plus. So we're going to be talking through some of the points from a blog post that I wrote in the notes. But first of all, we'll start by introducing ourselves. So I'm Molly. We have 4 kids, 2 by birth and 2 by adoption. They range between 10 to 20 years. We have always home educated. Our oldest went to school for about half a year, doing half time. And we noticed such a big change in him, from such a lively, chilled little chap to just really quite stressed. So we took him out and we've stayed home educating ever since. The boys are now in further education. One's at university, one is at college and has got university next year. Special needs or additional needs wise, we, I guess, cover, or similar to Sian, all the adoption, early life trauma, attachment kind of issues, plus dyslexia, plus although we haven't had any formal diagnosis or there's some ADHD, and a whole load of other things with her. She's a real complex, chaotic and wonderful little cookie. So that's us. Sian, you want to tell us about yourselves?
Yes, morning everyone. I'm Sian, and we have three daughters. And as Molly said, I'm also an adoptive parent. And yes, through adoption, have learned so much about additional needs that come with adoption, particularly on the emotional levels, and early life trauma and all that brings, attachment. So our daughters are now 13, 12 and 11. And within that, we've also got various levels of dyslexia and dyscalculia. So I'm really pleased to be doing this session with Molly this morning. Molly is a really good friend and definitely a good part of my support network. But the thing we want to really emphasize this morning is that we are not experts. The knowledge we bring this morning, it's just brought from our experience of bringing up our children, of home educating our children. And we just want this session to be an encouragement, and just to share our experiences and hope that brings some benefit to us all. I highly recommend Molly's blog, which is Mothering Through the Seasons. So when we were talking about or asked to do this session, Molly had this amazing blog post, and what we've done is we've taken the main points from her amazing blog post, and we thought that we would talk to those points. I think that's about it, isn't it, Molly, as an introduction?
I think so.
Yeah. Shall I kick off with the first one?
Yes, absolutely, go for it.
So one of the points that Molly has raised in her lovely blog is accepting our child's differences and embracing them. And of course, this is much of what we're going to say this morning is true for all families, whether they're home educated, whether they're in school, whether they have additional needs or not. So it's a bit of a strange one, isn't it? But specifically for children with additional needs, learning to accept their differences and embrace them is, I'm sure we can all agree to is quite a challenge at times, but it is really crucial. It is really crucial, isn't it? So all three of our daughters have emotional needs due to their early life trauma. And of course, we were fully aware of this when we entered into adoption. And when they started school, we went on a very steep learning curve of learning how our daughters might relate to their peers and other adults differently to other children, accepting that they need structure, that they need routine, that they need a clearly revealed plan for each day. That actually changed how we lived our lives in terms of accepting their needs and embracing them. And later, of course, came dyslexia and dyscalculia. And once we knew that this was something else that we were facing, acceptance was key. It always is, isn't it, in finding new ways to learn and approaching learning in a way that suits their learning needs. Now, our youngest has dyscalculia, and she was thoroughly demoralised with her school maths experience. I haven't explained at this stage that obviously our daughters did go to school, and we've been home educated now for 4 years. I'm still considering myself a bit of an amateur at the whole thing. And so with our youngest, I would say she was traumatised by her maths experience in school, but it certainly did her no favours. And it was something that she was very emotional about. You know, she'd spent quite a few years in school being bottom of the league in many things to do with maths. And so in terms of embracing that, we actually, for the first year of home ed with her, did no maths at all. We just didn't do it. We just didn't go there because that isn't what she needed. And now we are working our way through a very different approach, very kinesthetic approach to maths. And she is at the stage where she can say, I can do numbers. I can do numbers. And for us, that's a massive win. That is a massive win. How that, translates into how does she get her GCSE? I have no idea at this stage. But the fact that she can say, I can do numbers, mum, now, can't I? Is just such a huge thing. And I'm just really glad that we, in our insecurity and lack of confidence, didn't try and push through on something that clearly wasn't going to work for her. I think when it comes to emotional needs, again, adoption has blessed us in so many ways. Because we've had to learn a different way of communicating, of connecting on an emotional level that probably we didn't experience when we were growing up. And so we've had to learn to embrace those needs as well. So how we discuss feelings, patterns of behaviour, what gets triggered in what situation, how do we manage these situations? Learning how to rehearse responses before we go into situations that we know may be triggering, analysing what emotions popped up and when, what else are you feeling right now? This really isn't about the fact that I've done the wrong kind of plait, is it? What's actually going on? So again, embracing and accepting those differences is really, really important instead of pushing against them. And I have to say at this point that I really do not want anyone to think that we do this beautifully all of the time. There are definitely moments of non-acceptance by me. There are definitely moments of surely by now, and these things come out when you're at a low ebb. But again, I think in embracing these things, it develops a relationship where there is at least trust, and you can go back and say, look, this is what I was feeling then, and I'm really sorry, it wasn't on you, it was on me. So yes, I think an emotional apology is also very, very important. And just the last point to finish this section of Molly's blog, to acknowledge their limitations and their challenges is also really important. So dyslexia, it can result in our children in tiredness, in quick frustration, in a can't do attitude if the challenges are inappropriate. And so to make sure that what they are facing is appropriate, again, it's a huge learning curve, and we get it right and then we get it wrong, and we learn and we come back to things. And within that, then we get to focus on their strengths and we get to celebrate the strengths. So being a very much, I was a secondary school teacher for 17 years. So for me to unlearn some of my teaching thoughts and patterns has been a challenge at times. So for example, with our youngest, to focus on what she can do and to celebrate that is hugely important. So when she writes pages and pages and pages of a story and she brings it to me proudly, the urge that I have to resist to grab my red pen and to correct the grammar, the punctuation, the spellings, the paragraphs, I've learned this is highly damaging. And instead, to celebrate the initiative, the creativity, the imagination, and the pure enjoyment that she gets from writing these stories is hugely important. So hopefully within that babble that's just come out, you'll have heard about acknowledging their limitations and celebrating their strengths. Stop me there, Molly, it's over to you.
Oh, well, I was just wondering, actually, would you just like to speak a little bit into not comparing, because it's something that we talked about earlier a bit.
Yes.
And it's such a for all of us who are home educating parents. You know, we want to be that family with that, you know, that mother who sits there, her children sitting around her feet listening to a story, and we definitely aren't that family. So it needs to compare. So do you want to just say a couple of things into that?
Yeah, no, I never compare my children with other people's children. No, I'm joking. It's a constant temptation. It's a constant temptation. Oh my goodness, I find this, particularly now, actually, as they're getting older, I'm finding this a bigger and bigger challenge to not compare. Either my children within our own family unit, but particularly with other families, and particularly home educated families. And I think, you know, that this started in school, actually. I find out something about mothering finds us out, doesn't it? And I found out when our children started school that I was prone to this awful thing of comparison. So even in reception, when my eldest daughter started in reception, and my new mum friends were talking about how their children were on reading level 568 and mine was on 1. You know, it was a kind of, I'm not panicking, I'm not comparing, but I really am. Inside, I am. And I think within home education, we have to be really real that this continues in home education. It can be a thing in home education. And again, as they're getting older, as the whole talk of GCSEs starts approaching and becoming a part of our lives, really digging down into accepting who our children are and the pace that they need to go at in order to fully be who they were created to be. I think I'm having to dig deeper and deeper into that, and to learn to celebrate what everybody else is doing, but also to rest. And I don't find this easy, but also to rest in the fact that my children are who they are. There is nothing wrong with them. They are beautiful, wonderful, capable children in their own right. And it is our job to help them figure out the path that they need to follow. So I don't really know what else to say. That we know that comparison is the thief of joy. And I think it just takes a daily prayer, daily strength to say, thank you, God, for these children and for who they are, and to be confident that we have been given these children and we've been given them for a reason.
Was that me that's logged out?
Hello?
No, I can hear you both, Sian, Molly, I can hear you both.
Okay.
Oh no, are you back,
Okay,
Sian?
fine.
Are you back, Molly?
I'm here, yeah.
Great, we
Thank
can see you both.
Excellent. So I don't know if that was my Wi-Fi, it could have been. Okay, so can you hear me, Jo? Can I talk?
Yep, we can hear you, sound good.
Okay, thank you, Sian. And I would say Sian is fantastic at doing all that talking and explaining and kind of heart conversations with her children. And I've learned a lot from watching her do that. So our next one is to help us with our home educating our children with additional needs, is actually to get back to the root of why we're doing it, examining our whys, because I think this actually helps us to take a long-term view. And I think it also helps, it directs and influences how we work with our children and learn with our children on a daily basis. So you may, depending on how long you've been home educating and kind of what books you read and everything, you might have heard the term used, your educational philosophy. Now that sounds like a big term. Helen and myself in our podcast, Amended Teacups podcast, we've actually spoken about, we've done an episode about educational philosophy. So I will look it out so that we can link it in. But I think that this is really important. It actually, in fact, we've got a book coming out in September, and it comes out quite a bit. The theme throughout the book is why we're doing it, because it plays such a big part. And there are no rights and no wrongs to this. We are all different, and all of us will have different reasons, different whys for why we're home educating. And it will change over time as well. Why we home educate our younger ones may well not be why we're home educating our older ones. It will develop. Some themes will stay the same all the way through, and some things will change. And so anyway, to give us, so for an example, for us, relationship is central to our home education. So for us, we're a Christian family, so our relationship with God and teaching God's good and liberating and freeing word to our children is really important. So that's central, so that they can start to build their own relationship with him. They can't inherit it from us, but we can lead them in good ways. Character, following on from that character. Oh yes, so relationship with God, relationship with each other within our family. That's so important. You know, their sibling relationship, parental relationships, and those are often the ones, aren't they, which can be the most strained, particularly when you have children with additional needs. Now, I used to work for quite a few years as a children's nurse, a paediatric nurse, and I worked a lot during that time with children with additional needs, as well as children with life-limiting, thank you very much, with life-limiting illnesses and quite a wide variety of things. And one thing I really noticed with that is the impact. If you have one ill child or one child with the huge impact that has on others in the family. It has an impact on the parents, if parenting with somebody else, the parents' relationship. It has impact on the siblings. It is huge, and I think this is a real challenge, and it's often not talked about in the home education world. The impact of, if we have one child or maybe two children with additional needs, how that impacts our own relationship as parents, and our marriages, our relationships, and also how it impacts siblings. So, I mean, that's another huge topic, but I think we need to be aware of that. So anyway, going back to our EdPhil, we want to be able to everything we do is wanting to be able to develop and ground those relationships within our family, so that they will be lifelong relationships. And then that's things like having lots of traditions, having outings, having fun things together, real emphasis on doing fun things, because that creates memories. That's who we are. We're this family, and these are the kind of things we do. We love outdoor stuff. We love this. Other families will love music. Other families will be fantastic, maybe at performing arts. Other families are really super brainy and they're really going for it with those intellectual abilities. But all our families will be a completely unique blend, and that's part of growing together as a family and building those relationships. And then obviously relationship then goes out to other people. So that's with friendships, our own friendships within our community, and friendships within a much wider place as well, and how we relate to other people. So relationship and how we relate to other people is very central to us. Another thing which is sort of then follows on from that is our children's character. And obviously we have to look at our own characters as well, don't we? And as Sian said, I learned so much. I've learned so much being a parent, and a lot of not nice things about myself, which I'm having to gradually be refined. And we learn a lot about home educating as well. With it, it can test us to our limits, can't it? So we want for our, with our children, we want our children to grow, because they don't have it automatically, to grow in things like integrity and kindness, reliability, respectfulness, honesty, perseverance, compassion, courage, all those things which actually will enable them to live well, independently in the world when they leave our home. There's a verse in the Bible which I love, which talks about, what do you require us to do is to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. And whether or not we have a Christian faith or not, I think those are just wonderful things to be aiming towards with our children, to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly. We then want our children to develop fully into the people that they want to be. And so this will be different for every child. And we have 4 children, they're all very different. They have different gifts, different abilities, and we want them to develop into all these things. And so actually our learning, our, in a sense, kind of program, timetable, whatever we do, routines, whatever we do over the years with these children will be different for each child. So once we've got those things that we want for all of them, our oldest child he's musical, he's also very bright, he's very mathematical, he's doing an engineering degree, he's a real thinker. So a lot of his learning was aimed towards that. The second one is dyslexic, plus a real out of the box kid, loves sport. That's a whole different journey with him. The 2 girls, one of them is very creative, and going through the teenage years, and loves writing, but is very creative. And our little out of the box kaleidoscope child has all sorts of things. She loves getting messy, actually. So we just have to go with that, and we get very messy a lot of the time. So that's, and I think actually as we do that, as we are able to acknowledge, and whether that's written down, ours has never been written down actually, but it's something that's developed over the time, our why we're doing this. It actually takes the pressure off, because in fact we're home educating for our children to live well as adults in the outside world. And so therefore for some of them, for our oldest child, it was really important he got GCSEs, because actually he needed them to be able to do the A levels he was going to do, to be able to get into the good university he wanted to get into, to do the master. Now he's still doing it because he needs to keep getting the grades to get onto the master's course he wants to. So that's really important for him. Whereas for our others, for maybe one of our other children, maybe for our youngest daughter, we want her to live well. GCSEs probably aren't going to be an issue at all. I don't think she probably won't do any of them. She's creative, she's very practical, she's a real people person. There are other ways of doing things. And so actually, because I want her to live well and to develop her own gifting, GCSEs are really not that important for her. We will wait and see whether she does any or not. But the college is wonderful, and she can do other courses, vocational courses at college. So I think that's really important. I think flowing out of our educational philosophy, and we've touched on before, comes a whole idea of having fun together and making memories. And this is easier when they are younger. But I would say that if as many times that you can have, which are education, in a sense, formal education free, that you can just go out and have fun with your kids. Those are building blocks for your relationships in the future. And I do wonder, we've always only done any kind of formal learning, whatever our formal learning consists of, which isn't always very formal at all, on 4 days. And so we always have one day which is an outing day or just a fun day. When the three older ones were younger, they were generally places that we would visit, and they were a huge part, particularly of our second son, who was a very kinesthetic learner. Is that what you call a doing learner? And he learned a lot from our outings, visiting places, going out and about, walking, all sorts of things. Now with the two girls, a lot of our outings are simply fun based, and for me they're about building relationship and about restoring relationship. So where relationship has been fractured during the week, when it's been difficult, we go out on a Friday. Maybe it'll be just going out, getting a takeaway drink, taking a picnic, takeaway drink, and wandering around the charity shops. And they love doing that, and so do I. And that's something we love to do. We meet up with Sian. We try to do that once every half a term, and that is just fantastic. That's great sport for me, great sport for the girls. It's not overly educational, but it's part of what we do, and it's part of building relationship, and spending, cherishing the days we have with them when they're young. So I think that leads quite well on to our next point, which is our support network, which I think, Sian, you're going to speak into a bit.
Yes, no, thanks, Molly. And I have to say, Molly does know how to have fun. She really does know how to have her fun days are definitely fun days. And that does link in beautifully, because meeting up with Molly is actually part of what I would consider my support network. So again, another point on Molly's blog is finding your support network. And again, and I apologise for referring back to school, but it just all flows into our home ed experience. But again, when our children entered the school system, whether I liked it or not, it became very clear very quickly that as adopted children, they had very differing needs to other children in the school. And so being the person I am, I'm quite good at reaching out. So I did within the school get the school on board in terms of gathering all the adoptive families within school so that we could create our own community and support each other and work with the school to find ways of better supporting adopted children within the school community. And that was huge. That was absolutely huge for all of us, because it's just so much, I find that it's just so much easier when you know someone else who is facing similar challenges to you, that you can talk on that level with someone. And so that's something that I find particularly important to our growth as a family, to our sometimes on certain days survival, is to know who your support network is. And it's no different within the home education world. Each family is unique, each family is different, and there are families, again, come back to that comparison thing, where it looks like children are just progressing normally, whatever normally you consider normally to be. But to know other people who have children who are facing the same challenges as your children, just to be able to talk about those issues, to encourage each other, if you want to pray with each other about those things. And of course, I have close friends who don't have children with additional needs, and of course they can support me and are a huge support. but it's a different thing when you know someone is walking that same journey, and being able to relate to that person. So as Molly has said, you know, for us to be able to meet up and to shamelessly bribe our children with cakes and ice creams to spend longer in the play area so we get more time to chat. Molly's very good at coming prepared with those treats. In all seriousness, those are very special times for us because we connect very deeply when it comes to our children's additional needs. And again, following on from that, to another point that Molly makes in her blog is seeking out professional help. And I know that this is something that people have differing views on. So I've come across quite a few parents, both at school and within the home ed community, who don't want to label their children. And I completely get that. And we all aim to walk this journey, don't we, in the way that best supports our children. So I can only speak personally, but for us, since our daughters arrived, again, and it's part of who I am, I have always reached out to the support that I think we need as a family, or for my daughters in particularly. So that might be, in our experience, that might have been social workers, different forms of therapy. Our girls have just finished a very extensive and in-depth art therapy, all to do with life story work, for example. And the only reason that came our way is because I went out and said, I think this is something around life story, there's something here that we need. And so I'm so utterly grateful that came our way. We've had educational psychology assessments, which again have, for us, been really empowering to be able to find out more about what dyscalculia is, what dyslexia is. Dyslexia is such a broad spectrum, and all sorts of other things actually that came out within those assessments. And discernment is, of course, very necessary when investigating what is on offer. Not everything is going to be appropriate or the right thing for our children. But I just think that when we get to that stage of, we know there's a need, and when we're not sure what to do about it, to go out there, to Google, to ask your support network, what is there that I can access, is something that we need to remember is out there. I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, Molly.
No, that's great. And I think actually my what I was going to say next flows on quite well from that, is once we've sought professional help, that actually how we implement that. And again, this is going to be different for everybody. When I was training to be a children's nurse, and it was instilled in us that if a mother says there's something wrong with her child, listen to her, because 99% of the time she knows. And I was so grateful for that wise advice from one of my lecturers, because that is so true. If you are their mum, you know them better than anybody. And if you know this, if you think there's something wrong, you're very likely to be right. And also trust your instinct as well in how you then deal with that on a day-to-day basis. We're going to make mistakes. I learn a lot of what I learn. I have learned by making mistakes and doing it wrong. So my instincts are not always right. But just recently, for example, I just felt with our oldest daughter, my instinct for quite a long while was that I needed to let go and let her have a much more self-directed approach to her education. And up till then, we'd had a kind of a wholehearted Charlotte Mason-y type approach, which had worked really well. And I love doing that, based on relationship, based on good stories, lots of fun. It's worked really well, but I just felt actually I needed to let go of that. And it felt quite a big thing. And I was very grateful for people like Joe and others who kind of probably even unwittingly gave me the confidence to do that. And it's made such a difference. So in that particular instance, to help this daughter through really quite a tricky period, that helped to follow that instinct, and it takes courage to do that. But just other kind of more practical things, but which we have found help, which may or may not help you, because our families are all different. Things like having a rhythm and a routine very much helps for us. It's helped all the way through. Doesn't necessarily mean that we start at the same time every day, because sometimes we can have meltdowns over getting dressed in the morning, getting out in the morning can be difficult. All sorts of things can be difficult in the morning. As you know, one little thing can start the whole morning off wrong, and you would like to be sitting down at 9:30, but actually 11 o'clock you're just about getting there. But once you've got that rhythm in place, but then that something flows, and that helps. So it might not be the same time, but the same flow, and that very much helps for us. We do use a dyslexia program, which I used on our older son and now our younger daughter. If I know that I'm going to be asking them to do something which is difficult, and is going to, in a sense, raise their kind of stress levels, then I do everything I can to try to calm them beforehand. So things like a lot of jumping around. We do a Joe Wicks workout, lots of proprioceptive vestibular input, hanging upside down, rowing, all sorts of things. Deep touch pressure is a really good thing. Big hugs, or press ups on the ground, lots of things like that, using all your sensory things, a gym ball, a pasta pot while they're doing it. Then they're sitting down, she's sitting down, she's got a pasta pot to fiddle her feet with. Don't even try putting shoes on in the morning if she's working at home. Lots of kind of fiddle toys, Play-Doh, all these sorts of things, just to try to help her. And then the actual learning itself in very short spells. It's not a long time at all. And actually Charlotte Mason is quite good for that, because she advocates short times anyway, and a multi-sensory approach to her learning. Now, even with all that in place, it often doesn't work, and I think there's an acceptance that actually some days it's just not going to work, and not to beat yourself up about it. It's just some days it is, some days it isn't, and it's knowing when to just stop and say, okay, then let's go out for a walk instead, or let's do such and such, and if you can put some shoes and socks on or whatever, then actually let's just go out and about. So I did another practical thing I used to have for them was a Montessori type box with a lot of sensory things for fine motor skills. And actually writing this has reminded me that I need to redo that. We actually had lots of little bits of lentils and pasta in, and we had a mouse in the house, and the mouse got into the box and started nibbling away through it. So that was the end of that box. But actually, I think we can often think that our older children, because they're kind of past that age, 5, 6, 7, where they think that they would be needing those approaches, actually they still need it. They may be 10, 11, 12, but actually they still need that multisensory approach. So don't like get into the trap, which I often get into, thinking actually you are 10 years old, you should be able to do this. Actually, should not a helpful word when we have kids with additional needs. So that is a go-to box is a good idea. I found helps a lot. The other thing also I felt on difficult days, on any days, but actually as part of our rhythm, but actually on difficult days it can help too, is simply sitting down with a book. And I've discovered that if I can sit down with a book, even if there's lots of other stuff going on, and I just start reading, and amazingly they will come and they will start to listen because they're interested, and then have things around as you read. A lot of our learning is based around me reading to them, and have things, Play-Doh, drawing, Lego, all sorts of other things, sensory toys, all sorts of other things to have around, which I think helps with just enabling your children to work and to do these tasks, these difficult tasks, as best they can, but also knowing that it's not always going to work. And please, as I say all these things, don't think we've got it all sussed, because we haven't, and we have many days when actually this it just doesn't work at all, and we have to go and do something else. And that is where the long view comes in, that actually I have a relationship with my daughter, she is happy, and we can talk about things, and we'll leave the future to the future. So I think just in winding up, so I'll just briefly talk again. We've talked about, and we all know it, but looking after ourselves, and I think it's a good way to finish before we have questions. We do need to look after ourselves as parents. We need to anyway, but I think when we have children with additional needs on board, that's even more important. It's often more difficult. So whereas it might be possible, it was for my 2 older boys, it was relatively straightforward to have play dates, and relatives didn't mind having them occasionally because they were, fairly easygoing. It's been much harder with the others, and so I think we need it more, and it's harder to get. So I think if you do have family members who are able to take your kids that for a while, that is absolutely wonderful. But I think I'm a great also believer in kind of problem solving ways around giving ourselves some space while we still have our children. So like our meetups with Sian are fantastic. We are outside a lot so they can run and jump, and that's just easier. So and that's really been hugely supportive for me, having time with Sian. The days kind of with ourselves at home, we do try to have a quiet time after lunch. That can be difficult. We have, with children with additional needs, it's a screen-free time, playing in bedrooms. That may be complete no with your children, but that has, we do try to aim for that. It doesn't work every day. Obviously it can be bribing with food, but that's a time when I can have a bit of time to myself, cup of tea and some chocolate, and I can maybe read or pray. It may not even be very long, but that would be great, even if it's a short time. Going out and about is often good. If you can find a play park that they can play in, take a flask, or somewhere where there's a big sand pit. There used to be a pirate ship in a garden centre nearby, and that's a good place to go because they can play. I've got my flask of tea and my book, and just try if you can. It won't be perfect, you will get interruptions, but something is better than nothing. And then it's a teaching our children boundaries, that if mummy's sitting here, then actually mummy does need time out. And I do try to be quite firm with that. I get a lot of resistance to it, but I'm hoping that one day some of those boundaries will be respected a little bit more than they are at the moment. So, but amazingly, Sian, we have had 45 minutes and we have not been interrupted. I have to provide mine. They are watching Tangled downstairs on the TV.
I know 2 of mine slept in the tent last night, and I'm hearing them now outside. Thinking, gosh, I wonder what they're getting up to. But it's all fine. It's all fine.
Good. So, are there questions? I think I saw some coming up.
Yes, we had. Thank you both, Sian, Molly. You speak with such a warmth and from a place of just wisdom and vulnerability, and just recognizing that it's tough, but actually there's some beautiful moments in the days. And we did have some questions. So we had Megan's first question was, where do you find support groups for children with additional needs?
Yes, no, I saw that there, Megan, and I've been reading through those comments, which are really helpful. And actually, when I was thinking about my response to that, I think someone has put that they found their groups with trial and error. I think sometimes when we have children with additional needs, it can come with an awful lot of heartache for us as parents when we're trying to find groups that where our children are accepted, where our children feel comfortable, and that's the main thing, where they feel comfortable and that they can connect, and they can be comfortable enough to have fun. And I know, I can still feel that pain sometimes of situations where that just hasn't happened for our children. And there are times, I think it does come down to, there are times when you just have to accept that something doesn't work. I mean, and Jo knows our family quite well, and the 3 daughters, I've got our eldest who is so desperate to be sociable, to have a social time, and my other 2 that increasingly are quite, oh my goodness, something's just gone on my phone, beg your pardon. With my other 2, increasingly they are happy as a unit. So to get out there and do things they enjoy is great. But for me to accept that actually they are quite happy on certain days doing their own thing is something that I have to accept. But then I have that tension with my eldest who wants to get out there and meet people. So quite often we're in situations where one is going off doing things and the other two, or maybe one of them is next to me the entire time. So it's not always an easy situation. And this is my very long-winded way of saying that I do think it does come down to trial and error. I think it does come down, there isn't an easy answer. I think putting yourselves out there as a family, trying different groups, using discernment, listening to your children, looking at their behaviours, and as much as you might want to connect with other people, I think someone else has said, you know, that their support network is online or with a friend on a WhatsApp group. Sometimes I think it just comes down to accepting that you can connect with maybe the adult in a different situation, but it's not going to work for the children. So I think it is trial and error. It doesn't sound like a very helpful response. Molly, can you?
No, I'd say the same actually. That obviously there are Facebook groups there may be local things groups that you can find, whether they are for children with additional needs. So sometimes like soft play centres will have an SEN hour, so you could just rock up there and just see who's about and see if you just make any connections. Or else kind of going to home ed groups. But I realise that for some families that is really difficult. Just getting your child out the door is really difficult, and you have to start an hour before, just in the hope that you might, because it involves so much getting out of the door. And so fortunately, so arriving late at a home ed group can actually be difficult, just simply because your head, people maybe don't realize quite how difficult it's been. You can't just say, could you please put your shoes on and hop in the car, it's time to go. That is just too difficult. It's going to take a while. And so but fortunately a lot of home ed mums are late for things anyway. But I would say try various different things. It does take courage. It takes confidence. I somebody who pray. I've kind of just prayed that I would connect. So maybe if I go to in the past and I've been to one thing and I've just prayed, well, Lord, would you just guide me to one person that actually I'm going to connect with, or somebody who's going to get it. And then actually most of our connection, in fact, now takes place not within big groups, but within like people like Sian or other friendships, that whether that's with children individually or myself with the two girls, because obviously the boys have moved on now. And we've kind of made our own groups over the years, of our own friendship groups, and that's lovely, because actually they're people I can text and say, bad morning, we're going to be half an hour late, and whoever it is, get that.
That is such a precious thing, isn't it? And I'm also just thinking about there's a local home ed swimming group here, and a few of the children are autistic, and we went through a phase where the leisure centre just kept changing the times. And so these poor children, that was it. That was their week. That was for the parents. It was like, how can they do this to us? That was that child's day, their week ruined. But more so than that, that trust that the following week to try and get their children back out and trust that swimming was going to happen. It was just so heartbreaking. And so we fought that with the leisure centre. We have now got consistent times. But again, within that group, people can just text, this has happened, this is the effect it has. Really sorry, everyone. We'll try again for next week. And I think, even within that, there's always a next week. We try again. We'll come around again. And it is a bit of a patient walk, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And another question from Megan, which says, why wouldn't a parent work towards a diagnosis or label for their children if it helps them to better understand the child? Did I phrase that right, Megan? If I'm incorrectly posing your questions, do jump on the mic.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that, didn't I? I found that more within the home, the school world, I have to say, rather than the home education world. And I kind of understand it. I think certainly within the school world, there were parents who just wanted their children to be treated the same as other children. They had their own reasons for that. For one child, actually, I think maybe they were right. I'm not sure, but yeah, I think it is just that wanting their child to be, I don't know, included within that establishment. I don't really have much more to say on it than that, really. I think it's a very personal thing. It's a very individual thing, and again, I think it's an instinct, a parental instinct.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions there?
I know, just having journeyed with you a bit, Sian, actually, the talk about finding your community, I know it reflected that it takes time, doesn't it? You've just moved to Wales in the middle of nowhere, and actually just that journey, your swimming group, and finding community for the girls. Actually, there's a time element there, isn't there? In terms of, it doesn't just happen.
No, it really doesn't just happen. And I think, and Joe knows my struggles with this, but I think when I look back on this and I reflect on it much later on, I think I will see how us as a family unit during this time just started to appreciate the fact that we do enjoy being with each other. And I think, for me, I love a big community. That's not always true for all of my children. I think I've already mentioned that. But I appreciate a huge community. So it's been a struggle for me as much as for us as a family. But I also think society, there's that pressure, whether we put it on ourselves or whether there is generally a pressure to think that everyone has to have this huge community, of being involved in a huge community. And I think community can look, you can have community, but it can be on very different levels. It can look very different in different situations. And I think that's what I have massively had to learn as well, that it isn't about rocking up to a wonderful party 5 days a week. So yes, yeah, it does take definitely time.
Thank you, Sian. Molly, you were just reading Debbie's comment, weren't you?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
I wonder if it's worth reading it out, Molly, in case it doesn't come up in the recording.
Okay, hang on a second. Okay, so Debbie says, I wonder if you can help with some advice with evidence of support your child needs. We're currently going through a DLA appeal for the second time, and the argument is always that there's not enough evidence for the level of support he needs. Our son has Down syndrome with lots of additional needs. Since we are home educating, he doesn't have teachers' letters, the HCP, etc. They would need to rely on our word, but they don't. And whilst we have lots of medical professionals involved, they don't cover behavioural needs in their letters. I've also had a failed DLA attempt, actually, and I need to do it again, but it's a really hard thing to do, isn't it? And I know our daughter should be getting it, but it's actually quite a painful thing to do, isn't it? I think from speaking to other parents who home educate, if you know somebody who knows your son, and even if it's a family member or a family member who has a professional qualification, it goes to a government department. My sister's a social worker, so she also has children with additional needs, so she's taught me quite a bit about this. I wish she was on here because she could give you much better help than I could. But she said that she would write something for me, even though she's my sister, and she would write in her professional qualification, with her professional capacity. So if there are other people that I don't know, playgroup, I don't know who you go to, but the GPA, yeah, the GPs can, but I know what you mean. It's for that other support, isn't it? The stuff that actually the GP doesn't know, the everyday stuff. Look at the different communities you are involved in, any different groups that you do go to, and just see if there's anybody there who might be able to, even if it's somebody who knows you on a personal level. I think, from what I understand from my sister, that's actually acceptable. So I don't know, if that helps at all? I'm not sure. It's a difficult one. Good. But it's hard, but go for it though. But it's really difficult doing those forms. They're horrible.
And if you have already been to appeal once, I think that's my understanding. Yeah, I just would send you all courage and prayers as you approach maybe a second one, because again, I think it all depends who's on the panel on that given day. So just really want to encourage you and sympathize with you, because it's so hard, isn't it, just having to gather that evidence when you're talking about your own child.
But well done.
And Megan has just shared a website link here, which is cerebra.org.uk, which has a guide to fill in the form. So thank you for that, Megan. That's really useful for people.
Thank you. We must be just out of time, mustn't we?
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in and mention Carol's comment too. I think in response to Megan, when we appealed, I immediately asked for a detailed list of reasons, which I addressed individually with evidence, and we got supporting letters from people who knew us well, clubs, groups, and other letters. We kept a week-long diary, and I also brought up the Equality Act.
Well done.
Well, I really appreciate it. I mean, I just was writing notes, and I had already printed out the post, Molly, on your site. So I'm going to go back through all of this. I mean, there's just such crossover, right? I think sometimes, unfortunately, we sometimes don't think of these very practical and necessary things for each of our children. You know, it's like when a special need comes up, we think, oh, okay, now I have to, really get to know this child and who they are and what their strengths are, and really it applies to every single child. And so, no, I really appreciate all of your words, and yeah, just about celebrating what our children can do and developing that healthy rhythm to our days. And
yeah.
But yeah, I've written down all of these links and lists, and there's the Equality Act Joe just put in the chat, so I'm going to be following these too.
Thank you. Before we go out, I've also just realised that we have also done a podcast on dyslexia and kind of out of the box kids and dyslexia. So I'll find that link and send that to Juliet or somebody to kindly put up on the website.
Okay,
too.
that's great, because you mentioned a dyslexia program or something that you follow as well.
Right.
I don't know if you mentioned that in the podcast, but that would be interesting to hear more about.
Okay. I'll find both of those, yes, because that's good. And I think just to finish with, to take care of yourselves, you really do have to take care of yourselves. It's so much easier said than done, and most of us run off empty. But it's good to have that that's what we're aiming for, and to celebrate your children, and to know their small wins. It's fantastic, and celebrate their small wins. They don't have to be great big things. They can be small things, and celebrate them and enjoy them. And if you're around this afternoon, we have a Meet the Contributors for a new UK-based written home education book, which is coming out in September, which is very exciting. Our website has just launched. Sian has written a chapter, and it is very exciting. And we actually have a chapter. I was really keen to have a chapter on additional needs. So we have Lowe, who has spoken here, who's fantastic, and I've actually been doing her sensory processing program. And she has written a chapter about additional needs, and we have just lots of other really practical advice, all by UK home educators. So this afternoon, I think it's 2:00, isn't it, Sian?
Yes.
And we've got as many of us who are contributing. It's a collaborative effort. So there are quite a few of us are going to be there. So it'll be lovely to meet some of you, and to speak a bit more about our book. Thank you very much.